Welcome to another Salesforce Weekly hands-on tutorial. This time we are using Flow to help us improve our closed-loop marketing activities. Some background on lead management. Lead management in Salesforce is a simple journey which starts with the creation of the lead record. Then through various marketing activities, this lead is warmed up. Once the lead is qualified, it's converted into an account and contact, along with an opportunity to track the lead all the way through to closed one. In marketing speak, this process from start to finish is known as closing the loop or closed loop marketing, as sales can now report back to marketing on what happened to the lead. Part 1 of this tutorial, we will show you how to take a previously converted lead, now a contact, back through the lead management process. The solution for this will be to create a flow which pops a simple screen from a button on the contact record, prompts the user to select from a list of active marketing campaigns, then create the lead record. As part of this tutorial, we will recap on the basics of flow design as well as introducing the following advanced techniques: dynamic list choices, redirecting the user to the record created by the flow, access related fields using fast lookups. So sit back and enjoy this hands-on tutorial. Okay, so we're now ready to create the flow. Before I go and dive in and start adding screen elements onto the flow canvas, I need to set up some variables that I need in order to create the first screen, which is select campaign. So I'm going to go on the Resources tab and I'm going to create a new variable. This variable is going to be var campaign ID. This will store the marketing campaign that the user selects. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a dynamic choice, and this will present to the user a list of active campaigns. So I'm going to call it DC campaigns. And I'm going to create a choice for each campaign. So I'm just typing the word campaign and it's showing me all of the standard objects, all custom objects that start with the word cam. So I'm going to pick campaign, which is our marketing campaign object. I'm going to apply a filter. So I'm going to apply the isActive filter. I'm going to say isActive equals, and this is where I'm going to type global. So we have some global constants and these change depending on what type of field. So isActive is a Boolean, so I'm going to pick global constant true. Alright, you're following? Pretty simple stuff. So next we need to set the choice label. This will be the label that's on the value of the pick list. So I'm going to pick name, so it will show the names of the marketing campaigns. And I'm going to store the ID of that. I'm then going to scroll down and I'm going to then say, so based on the records selected, I want to take the ID, which is the value that I'm storing as I've set up here, and I'm going to put that in my variable campaign ID, which is now down here. So I've just typed var, which is the prefix that I gave my variable, and it's showing me my variable there. I could also type campaign as well. It's pretty clever. There's my variable campaign ID. Alright, so that will get us going initially. So the next thing I need to do is drag the screen element onto the canvas. I'm going to call this select campaign. This will be where the user selects the campaign. I'm going to go to the Add a Field tab and I'm going to select a drop down list. I'm going to drag that over to the right and then I'm going to click on it. When I click on it, it brings up the properties for that. This is where you start to give it some purpose. So I'm going to call this campaign and I'm going to come down to the choice selection, and what I'm going to do here is I'm going to find my previously created dynamic choice. Because I prefix it with DC, I'm just typing DC, which brings it up. Alright, there's not a lot else I need to do here. I can add some help text if I want to. Let's just add a little bit in here. Please select from active campaign list. There we go. Okay, so exactly the same as what we did with the select campaign. I'm going to pre-set up some variables that I'm going to use in the next element. So I'm going to click on the Resources tab and I'm going to create another variable. This one is going to be one that holds the contact ID, which we will pass in from the button. I'm going to give it a name, var contact ID. This time though, it needs to have an input-output type of input. Okay. Then we need a sObject variable. So I'm going to double click this. This is going to hold the contact record details. So I'm going to call this so for sObject var contact. And the object type is going to be contact. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is go back to the palette and add a fast lookup onto the canvas. So I'm going to call this get contact details. And the lookup object is going to be contact. Okay, and I'm going to apply a filter, and this is where we're going to say the ID, which is the contact ID equals var contact. Okay, and I'm going to assign this to our sObject var so var contact. There it is. I'm going to say assign null to the variable if no records are found. It's just a safety measure. And I'm going to start adding the fields that I want to take across and use in my lead record that I'm going to create. So I'm going to include the count ID, which you will see why. I'm going to include the first name, last name. I'm just going to pick the basic ones, email, and phone. Alright. At this point I recommend that you go ahead and save your lead just in case something happens. I've saved my lead, I've called it Closed Loop Marketing Demo Part 1. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to check that we haven't already created our new lead from our contact, and to do that we're going to use a field on the lead which is a lookup to the contact. So I'm just going to tab over here and you can see here's my field. I've called it created from contact. Alright, so I'm going to switch back to the flow and I'm now going to do a record lookup. I'm going to call this find lead. Okay, and the lookup object is going to be lead. Now I'm going to use my new field, which is called created from contact equals var contact ID. So if you remember, this will be the contact ID that the button passes into the flow. Alright, and the value that I'm going to return, I'm not really going to do that much with it. I'm just going to return the ID. Okay. Now I don't have a variable to hold my lead ID, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the drop down now. I'm going to use the create new. I'm going to create one on the fly. I'm going to assign null to the variables if no records are found. Alright, you following? Alright, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce now a decision. So let's go to the palette and drag across our decision. So this is where we're going to say, does our lead for the contact already exist? So I'm going to call this existing lead, and the outcome, the first one I'm going to do is no. Okay, now I'm going to come down to the resource and I'm going to say my variable lead, so I'm just typing var lead, there it is null. So I'm going to say is null is the operator, and I'm going to say global to bring up my true or false. So I'm going to say is my lead ID null, true. If that's true, then it's no. And I'm going to set a default outcome, and in here I'm just going to type yes. Keep it simple. I don't need to do anything else. I don't need any other additional outcomes. I just need no. Go ahead and create my lead, or yes, it already exists, don't create it. At this point I'm going to start to link up my flow so that we can see it taking shape. I'm going to take the select campaign screen and drag it to the fast lookup where I'm getting the contact details. I'm going to take the get contact details and I'm going to link that to my find lead. And I'm going to take the find lead and link it to my decision. At this point I recommend that you save this so that you don't lose all this hard work. Okay, so we're at the decision element and we're going to go down the path of existing lead no. So now we're ready to create our new lead record. So I'm going to drag a record create onto the canvas and I'm going to give it a name, create lead. And in the assignment section I'm going to tell it that I want to create a lead. Okay. So the next thing I need to do is I need to then start building the fields that I want to populate as part of this create process. So the first one I'm going to do is I'm going to populate my created from contact with my var contact ID. Okay, I'm going to go add row. I'm going to pick company. So this is where I'm going to call on my fast lookup for the contact. Because I've used a fast lookup there and not a straight lookup, I can now access related fields. In case you didn't know how to do that, this is how you do it. So if I pick SO var contact, I can then start coming into here. I'm just going to click on account ID and then I'm just going to back tab. And I'm now just going to put dot name, which is the account name, and just close that out with a squiggly bracket. So I'm just pulling through the account name. So a lead needs a company name, and it's now got one. I'm then going to add in the other fields. So I'm going to pick email. I'm going to pick SO var contact dot email. Yeah, you can see where I'm going now. Let's add in first name. Same thing, so I'm just going to go SO var contact first name. There they are. There he is. Sorry. Last name. Same thing. Last name. I'm going to put the phone number in there as well. So you could add as many fields as you need here, of course. Find the phone. Alright, then assign the record ID to a variable to reference it in your flow. So in here, I use my lead ID. Alright, just going to join that up. I'm going to save that. Ooh, it's just prompts me for decision routing. So existing lead is the decision, and we're saying no, so create a lead. All right, and then that branches out and it says no there to tell us that that's the no decision. For the yes decision, we want to check that this lead that we found doesn't already belong to the campaign that was selected. So the first thing we're going to do is do a record lookup. So I'm just going to drag that on to the canvas. Call this find campaign member. This time we're going to use the campaign member object. And apply some filtering here. So we only want campaign members for the lead that we found. So I'm going to use my lead ID, and we only want members for the campaign that was originally selected. So I'm going to bring that into there, and then the only field I need here is the ID. Just going to create a variable for this, var campaign, var campaign member ID. Give it null if no values are found. Okay, so we have our lookup on campaign member. Now we need to drag another decision across to check whether we find anything. So we're going to call this one existing campaign member. I'm going to go with new outcome of no campaign member. I'm going to bring up my variable just by typing var c, and there it is, campaign member ID is null, and because there's an operator we have to say global constant true. So if it's null, I'm going to do something, and then if it's yes, it's going to be our default outcome. So let's just link these up before we go any further. So existing lead, yes. Then we're going to find the campaign member. And then we're going to link that to our decision. At this point, we need to create a campaign member, but we can just drag this back up. So if there is an existing campaign member, what we want to do is we want to force the user to go back and pick another campaign. So I'm going to drag that back up to select campaign. It's going to give me some decision routing options, and I'm going to say if it's an existing one, go back to the beginning and select another campaign. Let's save that, make sure we don't lose it. A couple more things to add into the flow. Now let's add another record create and create our campaign member. So I'm going to call this create campaign member. I'm going to select the object. I'm just going to type campaign member in here and start building out the fields that we want to populate. So obvious one, campaign ID. So that's the campaign that we're going to link it to. Type lead ID. That's the lead record we're going to associate it with. Then if we want to set some of the other standard fields, so status is a common one in the campaign member. So I'm going to come in here, shoot down to the bottom, pick up the pick list values from there. I'm going to say this is planned. And then I'm going to store this in my campaign member variable. Then I'm going to link my decision created previously to that. So when there's no campaign member, create one. And also, if we've just created a lead, so there's no existing lead, I'm going to come in here and then create the first campaign member. All right, let's save that. Make sure we don't lose it. Okay, so the last thing in this flow is to add a confirmation page. So I'm going to drag a screen element down here, pop that there. Call this confirmation. And jump to the add field tab. I'm going to pick up display text which I can use to build out a text, including any of the variables that I've created and set in the flow, and display it to the user as a confirmation. So I'm going to call this confirmation message. You have successfully created a lead with a campaign member. Just going to dump in a couple of the values. So we've got the Salesforce lead ID. Just going to pick that up from here. Campaign ID. Oops. I'm going to pick that one in there as well. Let's just add that in there. Okay, campaign member ID. Let's add that in there as well. Okay, might as well display the contact ID as well. These are all the key variables. Just put that one on there as well. Alright, click OK, and then I'm going to link that up to there. Scroll back up, and that's our flow. Let's just move that over slightly and save. That'll be that Flash interface. Eventually they will update this to be like Process Builder, no doubt. Okay, so if you exit out of your flow, you should end up looking at the flow screen like this with your nicely saved flow. So the next part is we need to build a Visualforce page, which is going to be connected as a button onto the contact form page to launch the flow and take us through this process. But this one's going to be a little bit different. It's going to have a controller extension connected to the page to allow us to take the user to the record that's created as part of the flow. If you've read up a lot on flow, you notice that this is not an easy thing to do. It's not something that you can do standard through the flow designer. You have to use a bit of code, which I'm about to show you. And I'll post all of the code on the post as well, on the blog post as well, so that you can do it for yourself. All right, so let's just dive into Dev console. Create a new class. Just call this closed loop marketing flow extension. Can't type. I'm going to cheat a little bit here. I'm just going to come across to another browser and drag all the code and just put it in here. Alright. So a couple of things we need to check. So I'm not going to go into detail about how to create controller extensions here, but the main things that you need to be concerned with is this line here, which instantiates an instance of the flow. And this bit here, which I'm highlighting, is the name of your flow. So let's just check that against our flow. So my unique name is not that, so I'm just going to Control C that and bring that into there to make sure that that's the right name. Then we come into the logic, which basically does the redirection. And then here's the funky bit, if you like. So in here we're saying the finished location we want to be the var lead ID. So if you remember in the flow, there's a variable called var lead ID, which has an input-output type of output to allow us to access this in this controller. So I'm going to grab that ID and assign it to the finished location, and then I'm going to come in here, and those of you that are familiar with Visualforce and controllers and page reference, this will be pretty easy to you. So basically you're saying the page reference, we're getting the full record URL, which is this one up here, which just returns the Salesforce URL, and we're just adding on to the end the lead ID, and then we're redirecting the user to that. If there was no lead created, we're just saying let's just return them back to the contact ID. So I'm just going to save that. Okay, that's going to save. Okay, now it's actually given us an error message there, has no member name var lead ID. So let's come back into the flow quickly and just show you. It means I haven't set the input-output type correctly, which is good that you're seeing this, so you know how to resolve it. So I'm going to go to Explorer, click on the var lead ID, and yes, it's set to private. I'm going to set that to output. Click Save. Come across to the dev console, and I'm going to try and save that now. Hey presto, it's saved. Completely unplanned, but completely useful. So now we've got our controller. Let's just come out of here. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is create a button on our contact page. So I'm going to go Contacts, Button, and we go New Button or Link. We call it Create Lead. And say it's a detailed page button, and the content source is going to be Visualforce. And this is where I'm going to pick up my Visualforce page. There's only one, so I'm just going to save that. A couple of things I didn't do there. Let me just go back to this and just set the view behavior. Display an existing window without sidebar or header. And I'm going to drop that on my page layout for my contact. Pick the standard one, pick up my button, I'm just going to drop that down onto there, save that. Almost ready to test it.